Hello and welcome to this week's edition of Middle East Matters. I'm Julia Kim. Coming up in the programme today. From the West Bank to Syria, heavy snowfall brings joy and misery to parts of the Middle East. We'll tell you how residents are coping with the exceptionally icy conditions. Israel's president makes a historic first visit to the United Arab Emirates. The two countries normalised relations back in 2020. And skyrocketing inflation in Turkey leaves shoppers increasingly out of pocket and supermarket workers struggling to keep up with rapidly rising prices. But first, a rare cold snap has blanketed much of Israel, the West Bank and Jordan in snow. Lebanon and Syria have also been grappling with the harsh weather, making living conditions for the most vulnerable there even more difficult. The United Nations estimates that 90% of Syrian refugee households live in extreme poverty. Yinka Oyotari has this report.
Jerusalem's dome of rock blanketed in white. A rare sight as winter storms brought heavy snowfall to much of the region in recent weeks. The blizzards caused road closures and forced schools to shut their doors, but that didn't stop some from enjoying the winter wonderland.
It's nice, it's very nice. It's very nice, it's very photogenic.
The storm may have brought wintry joy for some, but for the displaced living in this camp near Idlib in Syria, staying warm is a battle. This man's tent couldn't stand under the weight of the snow.
I was asleep when the tent collapsed, and I had to crawl out, and people pulled me out. I would have died if they hadn't gotten me out.
Refugees in this camp are also scrambling to stay warm. To get heat, they light stoves in their makeshift shelters.
It's the first time I've seen this much snow. It's been a difficult year. There has been snow, collapsing tents. There's water flowing under the tents, and it's freezing cold.
The search for warmth can be a complicated and dangerous feat. 2 girls at this camp died when a stove in their tent exploded.
We heard the noise and I ran with a friend. Quickly after that, we found the tent and their bodies.
In neighbouring Lebanon, the effects of the harsh winter have been exacerbated by another chronic problem, the lack of electricity. The economic crisis and the explosions in Beirut, where the headquarters of the National Electricity Company are located, have dealt a heavy blow to a sector already damaged by decades of mismanagement. The country has been plagued with power outages which have been occurring more often and for longer periods of time. The blackouts, coupled with skyrocketing fuel prices, has meant heating is now a luxury.
We turn off the heaters because where can we afford to get all this diesel? And there is no electricity. State electricity hasn't come. The electric lines are cut, and of course no one is fixing it. It used to come on for 4 hours from 5 to 10. All night, we have no electricity.
A global surge in the demand for energy has led to historic fuel price highs across the world. In Lebanon, it's pushed many deeper into poverty.
We used to buy fuel for heating. $100 used to be enough to buy 2 or 3 barrels. Today, just 1 barrel costs $200, so we're using firewood instead.
On the 26th of January, Lebanese authorities signed a deal with Jordan to supply the country with electricity via Syria. The agreement will provide 2 extra hours of electricity, this in a country that grapples with nearly round-the-clock power outages. But the effects of the deal will only be seen in 2 months' time, long after this cold snap.
Israeli Foreign Minister Yair Lapid has demanded the removal of an Amnesty International report which labels Israel as an apartheid state. It found that Palestinians are treated as an inferior racial group and systematically deprived of their rights. It also said that Israel's policies of segregation, dispossession and exclusion are applied across all territories under its control. Well, the London-based NGO is the latest rights group to accuse the country of apartheid. Israel's foreign minister, though, has accused Amnesty of anti-Semitism. Take a listen.
Amnesty doesn't call Syria, where the regime has murdered 500,000 of its own citizens, an apartheid state. nor Iran, or other murderous regimes around the world. Only Israel. I hate to use the argument that if Israel wasn't a Jewish state, no one at Amnesty would dare make such a claim against it. But in this case, there's simply no other explanation.
Israel's president has made his first ever visit to the United Arab Emirates, a visit symbolic of rapprochement between the two countries. Isaac Herzog met with Abu Dhabi's Crown Prince on Sunday to discuss cooperation in trade, technology and health. The trip follows a visit by Naftali Bennett last month, a first by an Israeli Prime Minister. Karis Garland has the details.
A 21-gun salute and the playing of national anthems. Isaac Herzog was given a warm welcome in Abu Dhabi on Sunday, the first time an Israeli president has visited the United Arab Emirates. The two countries normalized ties in 2020 under the US-brokered Abraham Accords. Herzog urged more nations in the region to follow suit.
This sends a message to the entire region that there is an alternative for peace and living together, and that the sons and daughters of Abraham can reside and dwell together in peaceful coexistence for the benefit of humanity at large.
Herzog met with Emirati Crown Prince Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. In over 2 hours of talks, the leaders discussed strengthening cooperation on several fronts, including health, technology, investment and trade. Bin Zayed also thanked Herzog for Israel's condemnation of recent missile and drone attacks on the UAE, claimed by Iran-backed Houthi rebels in Yemen.
It's a stance that demonstrates our common view of the threat to regional stability and peace, particularly those posed by militias and terrorist forces.
His trip comes 1 month after a visit by Israeli Prime Minister Naftali Bennett to the UAE, also a first. Bin Zayed is expected to travel to Israel at the Prime Minister's invitation.
Well, one country where the Israeli president may not feel welcome is Turkey. Hundreds of demonstrators this Monday gathered outside the Israeli consulate in Istanbul to oppose his upcoming visit. Turkish President Recep Tayyip Erdogan said he would host Isaac Herzog before mid-February, opening a new chapter in their strained bilateral relations. But with a potentially lucrative energy project on the line, Turkey and Israel have been holding talks to amend ties. Well, staying in Turkey, residents are being hit particularly hard by rising global inflation. It comes on top of an existing currency crisis, the result of an unorthodox fiscal strategy by President Erdogan. Last month, the inflation rate soared to its highest level in almost 20 years in Turkey. The lira has plummeted, and supermarket workers are forced to change price tags several times a day to keep up.
The weekly shop is increasingly slim pickings for many Turkish families, as inflation reaches highs not seen for 2 decades. In this working-class district of Istanbul, retirees and stay-at-home mothers struggle to keep up with the rising cost of living. Febra Çivek says she's had to cut back drastically.
Prices have never been this high. Before, I could fill my bag up, but now it's half empty. I couldn't buy cucumbers today. The price multiplied by 6. I can't afford it.
That's all I have left. This money is worth nothing, and I don't know how much it will be worth tomorrow.
In the supermarket, the labels of basic necessities change every day. In 3 months, the price of oil has increased by 76% and flour by 86%. Meanwhile, milk jumped by 47% and egg prices went up by 66%. Turkish people have taken to satirizing the crisis on social media, such as parading cans of oil, now effectively a luxury item, on the red carpet, or locking it up in a safe along with some eggs. Subtle jabs that could be directed at President Erdogan's management of the crisis. Erdogan wants the lira to stay weak to promote the sale of Turkish products abroad, and has sacked a litany of ministers and bank governors who tried to get him to change tack. But it's a risky strategy that is hurting many Turks. They must now rely on bread subsidized by the City Council of Istanbul to make ends meet, while Turkey was once touted as an economic powerhouse.
The bread here is half the price than elsewhere. I commute for an hour every day to get it. Eventually, we'd just have to stop eating.
People would always say that Turkey was doing well, but those who benefited from its economic growth were those close and loyal to the ruling party. They got rich while normal people struggled more and more.
Some of that frustration spilled out onto the streets in December, with a protest of some 5,000 union workers in Istanbul and a student demonstration in Ankara, which was violently repressed. Kang Dilizaksu is one of the students arrested and prosecuted for protesting over rent hikes. He keeps caricatures of Erdogan in his home, and he blames the president for the crisis.
People who are angry are starting to fight back, such as students, despite the repression. I hope this economic crisis will lead to political changes.
Protests are still rare for fear of repression, but Turkish people could still express their anger with their ballots. The latest opinion polls reveal that the president's popularity is at an all-time low, and he would be on track to lose the next presidential elections, slated for next year.
And finally, Egypt is a step closer to an 8th Africa Cup of Nations title after reaching the semi-finals. Mohamed Salah scored the equaliser and created the winner, beating Morocco 2-1 in extra time. Egypt facing host nation Cameroon this week. The two countries are the tournament's most successful teams, with a combined 12 titles between them. It promises to be an exciting matchup, and France 24 will be bringing you all the updates and analysis of that game on Thursday. And that brings us to the end of this edition of Middle East Matters. Thanks for watching. There's more world news coming up after this.